Commander Vrath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Judgment, and watched another world prepare to fall. Through the massive viewing screen, the human colony planet called New Sarajevo hung in space like a blue and green jewel. It would be his 48th conquest. The number pleased him. The Kethral Dominion had perfected the art of conquest over 300 years. Their method was simple and effective. Arrive with overwhelming force. Destroy something large enough to be seen from the planet's surface. Wait 6 hours. Accept surrender. The system worked every time because it was logical. No species could argue with the mathematics of annihilation. Vrath's tactical officer, a young female named Sheth, approached with the standard invasion protocol displayed on her data tablet. Her scales gleamed under the bridge lights, marking her as newly promoted. "Commander, all fleet elements are in position," she reported. "Shall I initiate the demonstration?" Vrath nodded once. He had performed this ritual so many times that he could recite every step from memory. The demonstration was always the same. Select the largest moon, charge the planet cracker cannon, fire. Watch the moon break apart like an egg. The debris field would rain down harmlessly into space, but the message would be clear to everyone below. "Begin," Vrath commanded. The Eternal Judgment's main weapon hummed to life. Power readings climbed across every screen on the bridge. Then a lance of purple energy shot across the void and struck New Sarajevo's larger moon. For 3 seconds, nothing seemed to happen. Then the moon simply came apart. Huge chunks of rock tumbled away from each other in slow motion. Within minutes, what had been a solid satellite became a spreading cloud of debris. Sheth transmitted the standard surrender demand to the planet below. 6 hours to comply. Failure to surrender would result in the same fate for their world. The message had been translated into human language, just as it had been translated into 47 other languages before. Vrath settled into his command chair and waited. This was always the boring part. The humans would panic. Their leaders would argue. Some would want to fight. Others would want to surrender. In the end, logic always won. 6 hours was barely enough time to evacuate even a fraction of their population. They would surrender to save lives. But something unexpected happened. After only 2 hours, a response came from the planet's surface. Sheth's face showed confusion as she read the message. "Commander, the humans are responding, but it is not a surrender." Vrath leaned forward. "What are they saying?" "They say they are evacuating civilians. They say their military forces refuse to surrender. They say..." Sheth paused, her translator struggling with the human words. "They say we can go to hell." A ripple of shock moved through the bridge crew. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever responded this way. It made no sense. Did the humans not understand what would happen to them? Vrath watched his tactical display. Sure enough, hundreds of small ships were launching from the planet's surface. Transport vessels packed with civilians fleeing to the outer system. But the human military ships were not running. Their small fleet of destroyers and frigates was forming a defensive line. "How many warships do they have?" Vrath asked. 12 destroyers, 8 frigates, and various support craft, Sheth reported. "Against our battle fleet of 96 ships." The numbers were absurd. Did humans not understand mathematics? Vrath almost felt insulted. This would not be a battle. It would be a massacre. "Open fire on their military vessels," Vrath ordered. "Destroy them quickly so we can proceed with planetary bombardment." The Kethral fleet advanced. Their weapons were superior in every way. Their shields were stronger. Their tactics had been refined over centuries. The human fleet should have lasted minutes, but the humans surprised them again. Instead of forming the traditional battle line and trading fire until one side broke, the human ships scattered. They used the debris field from the destroyed moon as cover, diving between chunks of rock larger than buildings. When Kethral ships pursued, the humans would suddenly reverse course and fire from unexpected angles. One human destroyer managed to disable a Kethral cruiser by targeting its engine core with a lucky shot. Another used some kind of electronic attack that knocked out the sensors on 3 Kethral frigates. The humans fought like insects, stinging and retreating, never staying still long enough to be properly targeted. After 6 hours of chaotic fighting, Vrath had destroyed 9 human ships, but he had also lost 2 cruisers and had 5 more damaged enough to need repairs. The remaining human ships, battered and burning, retreated toward the outer system, all except one. A single human destroyer remained in orbit. It was smaller than Vrath's flagship, with obvious damage along its hull. Scorch marks covered its armor. One of its engine pods was barely functioning, but it stayed in orbit, circling New Sarajevo like a guard dog protecting its home. Sheth pulled up information on the vessel. It is called the Defiant. Captain Sarah Okonkwo commanding. Crew of approximately 200. Frath studied the lone ship. 200 humans against his fleet of 87 remaining vessels. It was beyond logic. It was beyond reason. What did they hope to accomplish? Hail them, Frath ordered. Offer them one chance to surrender. The response came quickly. A human woman appeared on the screen. She had dark skin and gray hair pulled back tightly. Her uniform was scorched and torn. Blood dried on her forehead, but her eyes were hard and cold. This is Captain Sarah Okonkwo of the United Human Space Force. We do not surrender. We do not retreat. If you want this planet, you will have to go through us. Frath almost laughed. Captain, you have one ship. I have 87. This is not bravery. This is stupidity. The human woman smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Then come and get us, Commander. We will see who is stupid. The screen went dark. Frath sat in silence for a long moment. Around him, his crew waited for orders. He should simply destroy this annoying ship and be done with it. It would take minutes. Then he could proceed with the invasion, but something made him hesitate. In 300 years of conquest, no species had ever refused to run when given the chance. These humans were either the bravest species in the galaxy, or the most foolish, perhaps both. Send a message to High Command, Frath said slowly. Inform them that the invasion of New Sarajevo is proceeding as planned. But there may be a slight delay. He stared at the image of the Defiant on his screen. One small ship. 200 humans. What harm could they possibly do? He would learn the answer soon enough. The Thorn was about to embed itself deep. Captain Sarah Okonkwo floated through the damaged corridors of the Defiant and assessed her situation. It was bad. 3 of their primary weapons were offline. The main shield generator was running at 30% capacity. Hull breaches had sealed automatically. But they had lost 2 cargo bays and the forward observation deck to the vacuum of space. 17 crew members were dead. 23 more were injured, but they were still flying. And that was all that mattered. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, met her in the engineering section. His face was covered in grease and his hands were wrapped in bandages from touching hot metal. Captain, we have maybe 3 days of this before something critical fails, Marcus said without any greeting. The port engine is held together by prayers and welding tape. Our ammunition is down to 40%. And the crew is exhausted, Sarah nodded. She had expected as much. 3 days is enough. We just need to make them angry. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Make them angry? Captain, they are already trying to kill us. No, Sarah said. They are trying to swat us like a fly. I want them obsessed. I want them to forget about the planet below and focus everything on us. Every day we keep their attention is another day for civilians to evacuate. Another day for reinforcements to arrive. Reinforcements are 6 months away at best, Marcus pointed out. Then we buy 6 months, Sarah said simply. She moved to the tactical station where Ensign Yuki Tanaka was monitoring the Kethril fleet movements. The young woman looked up with tired eyes. They are forming a perimeter around the planet, Yuki reported. Standard invasion pattern. They think we are trapped. Sarah studied the display. The Kethril ships formed a perfect geometric pattern, each vessel exactly positioned to cover any possible escape route. It was textbook tactics, beautiful, efficient, and completely predictable. Show me the debris field from the moon, Sarah ordered. The tactical screen shifted to display the massive cloud of rocks and dust spreading through orbit. The destroyed moon had created millions of pieces of debris, ranging from dust particles to chunks of stone as large as buildings. The Kethril ships carefully avoided the densest parts of the field. Sarah smiled. That is where we live now, right in the middle of that mess. Over the next 3 weeks, the Defiant became a ghost. The ship would hide in the debris field, its systems powered down to minimal levels to avoid detection. Then it would suddenly appear near a Kethril supply ship, fire a quick barrage of missiles, and vanish back into the rocks before the enemy could respond. The Kethril learned to send escorts with their supply ships. So Sarah started targeting their communication relays instead, the small satellites that allowed the fleet to coordinate. Then she attacked their patrol routes, mining the paths she knew they would take. Each attack was small. Each one caused minimal damage by itself, but they added up. More importantly, they were unpredictable. The Kethril could not establish a pattern. They could not anticipate where the Defiant would strike next. Commander Vrath became obsessed with destroying the human ship. Sarah knew this because his tactical responses became increasingly aggressive. He diverted more ships to hunt for the Defiant. He extended patrol routes. He offered rewards to any crew that could locate the human vessel. "He is taking the bait," Marcus observed after the Defiant's latest attack on a Kethril fuel depot. "He has assigned 20 ships just to hunt for us." 20 ships that are not invading the planet," Sarah replied. 20 ships that are wasting fuel and ammunition chasing shadows. But the strategy was taking its toll on the crew. They could not rest. Every few hours the ship had to move to a new hiding spot or risk being discovered. Combat operations were followed immediately by frantic repairs. Hot meals were a luxury. Sleep came in 30-minute intervals. Sarah found Lieutenant Chen in the mess hall at 0300 hours, staring at a cup of cold coffee. She sat down across from him. "Talk to me, Marcus," she said quietly. "We lost 2 more today," he said. "Davis and Kowalski. They were repairing the starboard weapons array when a Kethril patrol got too close. We had to do an emergency burn to escape. The acceleration forces threw them off the hull." Sarah closed her eyes. 19 dead now. The number was burned into her mind. "Their families were on the transport ships," Marcus continued. "Safe, evacuated, but they stayed behind to give them that chance." He looked up at her. "How long can we keep this up, Captain?" "As long as it takes," Sarah said. But she heard the exhaustion in her own voice. A proximity alarm interrupted them. Yuki's voice came over the ship's speakers. "Captain, we have multiple contacts converging on our position. I think they found us." Sarah and Marcus ran to the bridge. The tactical display showed 6 Kethril ships moving through the debris field in a coordinated search pattern. These were not normal patrol vessels. They were smaller, faster, and they were using active sensors to cut through the debris. "Hunter-killers," Marcus breathed. "They sent their special forces." Sarah watched the display carefully. The enemy ships were moving in a precise formation, leaving no gaps. Professional, experienced, they knew exactly what they were doing. "We cannot hide from them," Yuki said. "Their sensors are too good." "Then we do not hide," Sarah decided. "Plot a course through the debris field toward the gas giant. Maximum speed." "Captain, that will take us into the gravity well," Marcus protested. "If we go too deep, we will not have enough power to escape." "I know," Sarah said calmly. "Trust me." The Defiant's engines roared to life. The ship shot forward through the debris field, weaving between chunks of rock at insane speeds. The hunter-killer ships followed immediately, their faster engines allowing them to close the distance. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. Energy beams burned past the Defiant's hull. Marcus returned fire, but the enemy ship's shields absorbed the damage easily. 30 seconds until we hit the gas giant's outer atmosphere," Yuki called out. "Captain, we need to turn now." "Not yet," Sarah said, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair. The Defiant plunged into the upper atmosphere of the massive planet. The ship began to shake as atmospheric friction grabbed at it. Behind them, the hunter-killer ships followed, confident they had the human vessel trapped. "Now," Sarah shouted. "Full power to engines, maximum climb angle." The Defiant's engines screamed. The ship used the gas giant's gravity to slingshot around the planet, building up tremendous speed. At the same time, Sarah gave another order. "Deploy all remaining mines. Everything we have." The Defiant released its entire payload of nuclear-armed mines as it whipped around the planet. The pursuing Kethril ships ran straight into the cloud of explosives. 3 hunter-killers disappeared in balls of nuclear fire. The others were forced to scatter, their formation broken. But the Defiant was not done. The ship came out of its slingshot maneuver at incredible speed, heading straight back toward the Kethril fleet's main formation. "Captain, we are going too fast," Marcus said, alarm in his voice. "We cannot slow down in time." "I know," Sarah said again. "Brace for impact." The Defiant, traveling at speeds no ship should ever attempt in close quarters, smashed through the Kethril formation like a bullet. 3 enemy ships could not move aside in time. The Defiant's armored prow crashed through them, tearing metal and flesh. Alarms screamed. The hull groaned. Something exploded deep in the engine room. Then they were through the formation, tumbling toward the planet's surface. "We have lost main power," Yuki reported, her voice remarkably steady. "We are falling." Sarah looked at the planet growing larger in the view screen. New Sarajevo, the world they had stayed to defend. Then we fall toward home, she said. Everyone prepare for crash landing. It has been an honor serving with you. The Defiant fell from the sky like a burning star, and the Kethril fleet watched in stunned silence. The Defiant crashed in the mountains west of New Sarajevo's capital city. The ship carved a trench 3 miles long through the forest before finally coming to rest against a cliff face. By all logic, everyone aboard should have been dead. Sarah opened her eyes to find herself hanging upside down in her command chair, held in place by safety restraints. Her head pounded and she tasted blood. Around her, the bridge was a disaster. Sparking wires hung from broken ceiling panels. Screens flickered and died. Emergency lighting cast everything in red. Sound off, she croaked. Engineering here. Marcus's voice came through, distorted by static. We are alive barely. Medical bay, another voice called. We have casualties, but we are functional. One by one, different sections reported in. Of the 183 crew members who had been alive when they entered atmosphere, 147 survived the crash. Sarah felt each loss like a knife wound, but there was no time to mourn. Get everyone out of the ship, she ordered. Grab whatever weapons and supplies we can carry. The Kethril will be coming. It took 6 hours to evacuate the Defiant. The crew worked frantically, knowing that orbital bombardment could come at any moment. They pulled out weapons, ammunition, food supplies, medical equipment, and most importantly, the ship's AI core. That small piece of technology contained all their tactical data and communication encryption. As the last crew member climbed out through the torn hull, Sarah stood in her ruined bridge one final time. She had commanded this ship for 3 years. It had been her home. Now it was a broken wreck, but it had served its purpose. The Defiant had bought time. How much time, she did not yet know. A human resistance fighter met them at the edge of the crash site. His name was Pavel, and he looked like he had been fighting for months. His clothes were torn, his face was dirty, and his rifle was held together with tape. Captain Okonkwo, he asked, almost disbelieving. We saw your ship fall. We thought everyone was dead. Not yet, Sarah said. Where is your command? Pavel led them through the mountains to a hidden base built into a series of caves. Hundreds of resistance fighters had gathered there. A mixture of military personnel who had stayed behind and civilians who had refused to evacuate. When Sarah entered the main chamber, the entire room fell silent. Then someone started clapping. Others joined in. Within seconds, the entire cave echoed with applause. An older man with a gray beard approached her. He wore the insignia of a general, though his uniform was as worn as everyone else's. General Park, he introduced himself. I was in command of the Planetary Defense Forces. When your ship stayed in orbit alone, you gave us hope. When you fought them for 3 weeks, you gave us time. Welcome to the Resistance, Captain. Sarah saluted. Request permission to join your command structure, sir. Park smiled. Granted, but I think you will find that we can use your expertise. The Kethril have landed ground forces, 20,000 soldiers with armor support. They control the lowlands and the cities. We have perhaps 5,000 fighters in the mountains. We are outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on supplies. What are our advantages? Sarah asked. We know the terrain. We have the support of the civilian population still on planet, and we have something the Kethril did not expect. Park gestured to a technician working with the Defiance AI core. Your ship's computer. It has been learning their communication protocols. We can listen to their radio traffic. Sometimes we can even send false orders. Sarah felt a smile spread across her face. This changed everything. Over the next weeks, the Resistance transformed from a desperate collection of survivors into an organized fighting force. Sarah brought military discipline and tactics. The Defiance crew, experienced in unconventional warfare, trained resistance fighters in ambush techniques, demolitions, and electronic warfare. They started small. A patrol here, a supply depot there. Each attack was carefully planned using intelligence gathered from intercepted Kethril communications. The aliens were not used to ground combat. Their doctrine emphasized orbital superiority and overwhelming force. Fighting an enemy that hid in mountains and struck from unexpected angles frustrated them. Commander Vrath grew more frustrated with each passing day. From orbit, he could see his ground forces bogged down in counterinsurgency operations. His superiors sent increasingly angry messages demanding to know why one primitive planet was taking so long to conquer. He made the decision to lead a strike force himself. Intelligence had located what appeared to be the human command center. Vrath would crush it personally and end this embarrassing situation. The Kethril strike force consisted of 50 soldiers in powered armor, supported by 2 heavy walkers. They moved through the mountain passes at night, using thermal sensors to avoid ambushes. Their intelligence was good. The human command was exactly where the reports indicated. What the intelligence did not mention was that the humans knew they were coming. Sarah watched from a concealed position as the Kethril force entered the valley. The supposed command center was actually an abandoned mining facility. But the Kethril did not know that. They approached carefully, professionally, weapons ready. "Wait for it," Sarah whispered into her radio. Around the valley, 50 resistance fighters held their positions, hidden among rocks and behind trees. The Kethril reached the facility entrance. Commander Vrath himself was with them, his distinctive armor marking him as the leader. He gestured for his troops to enter. "Now," Sarah said calmly. The valley exploded. Charges buried in the ground detonated, throwing Kethril soldiers through the air. Humans fired from concealed positions, targeting the gaps in powered armor. One of the heavy walkers stepped on a buried mine and toppled over like a falling tree. But the Kethril were professional soldiers. They did not panic. They immediately formed defensive positions and returned fire with deadly accuracy. Their weapons were far superior to anything the humans had. Energy beams turned rocks into molten slag. Missiles streaked toward human positions. Sarah knew they could not win a direct fight. "Fall back. Collapse the pass!" The resistance fighters retreated up the mountain slopes as more explosives detonated behind them. Carefully placed charges brought down tons of rock, sealing the valley entrance and trapping the Kethril force inside. From his position behind a boulder, Commander Vrath watched the humans disappear into the mountains. His force had taken 30% casualties in less than 5 minutes. The humans had taken their ambush positions in terrain his sensors could not penetrate. They had used his own confidence against him. For the first time in his career, Vrath felt something unfamiliar: doubt. That night, General Park and Sarah reviewed the battle in their command cave. The attack had cost them 12 fighters, but they had killed or wounded nearly 30 Kethril soldiers and destroyed both heavy walkers. "They will adapt," Sarah warned. "Vrath is too smart to fall for the same trick twice." "Then we change our tactics," Park said. "Your crew has been teaching us well. We will keep changing until the Kethril cannot predict what we will do next." Marcus entered the cave with news. "Captain, we are receiving reports from other systems. 3 other occupied worlds have begun resistance movements. They are calling it the Defiant Protocol after our ship." Sarah felt something stir in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or vindication. Their stand had meant something beyond just buying time. Outside the cave, in orbit above the planet, Commander Vrath stared at tactical displays and made a decision. He sent a message to High Command. It was not a surrender, but it was an acknowledgement that this invasion would not follow standard procedures. The humans had shown them something the Kethril had not encountered in 300 years of conquest. They had shown them that sometimes the rules of warfare did not apply. Sometimes the supposedly weaker opponent could find ways to make strength irrelevant. The thorn had embedded itself deep, and now it was beginning to fester. 6 months passed. The war for New Sarajevo became a grinding stalemate that defied everything the Kethril Dominion understood about conquest. Commander Vrath controlled the orbital space completely. His fleet could glass the entire planet if he chose. But High Command had made it clear that New Sarajevo needed to be taken intact as an example to other worlds. A pile of radioactive ash would not discourage resistance. It would inspire it. On the ground, the situation was worse. The Kethril held the cities and major installations, but they controlled nothing beyond their immediate perimeter. The countryside belonged to the humans. Supply convoys needed heavy escorts. Patrols that ventured too far from base camps disappeared. Communication relays were sabotaged faster than they could be repaired. Young Officer Sheth walked beside Vrath through one of the occupied cities. Her scales had lost some of their shine over the past months. She carried a sidearm now, something officers rarely needed to do in conquered territory. "Commander, we received another report," she said quietly. "3rd Platoon was ambushed on Route 7. 15 soldiers dead, 8 wounded. The humans disappeared before reinforcements arrived." Vrath did not respond immediately. He was watching human civilians in the street. They moved aside as the Kethril patrol passed, but there was no fear in their eyes anymore. Just cold calculation. Any one of them could be a resistance fighter. Any building could hide weapons. The entire planet was hostile. What are our casualty rates? Vrath asked. 2,043 killed in action, 4,000 wounded, another 300 missing. Sheth hesitated. Commander, that is nearly a third of our ground force. The numbers were unprecedented. The Kethril had never lost so many soldiers occupying a single planet. High Command was demanding explanations. Some were calling for Vrath's execution for incompetence, but Vrath knew the truth. He was not incompetent. The humans were simply unlike any enemy the Dominion had ever faced. In the Resistance Command cave, Sarah reviewed reports with General Park. The situation was equally desperate from the human perspective. We are running critically low on ammunition, Park said, pointing to supply charts. Medical supplies are nearly exhausted. Food stocks will last another 2 months at most. What about the Defiance AI? Sarah asked. Can we still intercept their communications? Yes, but the Kethril are adapting. They change encryption protocols daily now. It takes longer to break their codes. Park rubbed his tired eyes. We have lost 800 fighters. Another 200 are too wounded to fight. We are recruiting civilians, but training takes time we do not have. Sarah nodded. She had expected this. Wars of attrition were measured in resources, and the Kethril had far more than humanity did. But wars were also measured in will, and that was one resource the humans had in abundance. The reinforcement fleet? Sarah asked, though she knew the answer. Still 4 months away, assuming it arrives at all. A young resistance fighter burst into the cave breathless. Captain Okonkwo, General! There is a Kethril soldier at the perimeter. He came alone. He wants to talk to you specifically, Captain. Sarah and Park exchanged glances. A trap seemed obvious. But Sarah was curious. They found the Kethril soldier standing in a clearing with his weapons on the ground and his hands raised. It was unusual to see one of them without armor. He looked almost fragile without it. Sarah recognized him from captured footage. Officer Sheth, she said. You are brave or foolish to come here alone? Possibly both, Sheth admitted. His translator rendered his words in accented English. I come with an unofficial message from Commander Vrath. He wishes to speak with you under a flag of truce. Why would I trust that? Sarah asked. Because we are both soldiers, Sheth said simply. We are both tired of watching our people die. And because my commander wishes to understand you. The Kethril have conquered 47 worlds. We have fought hundreds of species. But we have never encountered anything like humans. 2 days later, Sarah stood in a neutral location, an abandoned warehouse in the no-man's land between Kethril and human territory. She brought only Marcus with her. Commander Vrath arrived with Officer Sheth. For a long moment the two commanders simply studied each other. Vrath spoke first. You should have surrendered. On the first day, you had 1 ship. I had 96. It was mathematical certainty that you would lose. Mathematics is not everything, Sarah replied. You forgot to account for stubbornness. I am beginning to understand that, Vrath admitted. Captain Okonkwo, I have read your service record. I know about your family. I know they died when the Dominion raided the colony where they lived. You have every reason to hate us. Sarah's face hardened. You know nothing about my reasons. Then explain them to me, Vrath said. I am trying to understand why humans fight when the logical course is surrender. Every other species recognizes when they are beaten. They understand that survival is more important than pride. Why do humans not? Sarah thought about her answer carefully. Because you misunderstand what you are asking. You think surrender means survival? But to humans, surrender means becoming something we are not. You want us to accept your dominion, to live under your rule, to give up our freedom. That is not survival. That is slow death. But actual death is better? Vrath asked, genuinely puzzled. If the choice is between dying on our feet or living on our knees, then yes, Sarah said. Humans have a saying, give me liberty or give me death. You cannot comprehend this because your species values order and hierarchy above all else. But humans value freedom. We will endure almost any hardship to keep it. Sheth, who had been silent, spoke up. We have been documenting human tactics. The ambushes, the guerrilla warfare, the refusal to engage in open battle. These are the methods of the weak against the strong. Do you not see them as dishonorable? Marcus laughed bitterly. Honor is a luxury of the strong. We use the weapons we have. If all we have is stubbornness and cleverness, then that is what we will use. Vrath stood silent for a long moment. I came here to offer terms. Not surrender, but a ceasefire. You have hurt us more than any other world has. High Command will not admit it publicly, but the Dominion is reconsidering its expansion into human space. Other occupied worlds are rising up, inspired by your resistance. You have cost us far more than this one planet is worth. What are your terms? Sarah asked. We will withdraw from New Sarajevo. Your people can have their planet back. In exchange, you will allow our forces to leave peacefully. No attacks during the withdrawal. Sarah considered this. It was tempting. Her people were exhausted, low on supplies, and still months away from reinforcement. But something made her hesitate. What happens to the other occupied worlds? She asked. Vrath's expression hardened. That is not part of this negotiation. Then there is no deal, Sarah said firmly. You think you can divide us? Let New Sarajevo go and keep the others. That is not acceptable. You are in no position to make demands, Vrath said, anger creeping into his voice. Neither are you. Sarah shot back. You control the cities, but not the planet. Every day you stay costs you soldiers and equipment. Every week that passes, more worlds rebel. You cannot hold an empire together when every conquest requires this much blood. Your dominion is cracking, Commander, and we are the wedge. The meeting ended without agreement, but as Sarah left, Sheth stopped her briefly. Captain, I have been studying your species. I have learned much. If the Dominion survives this, it will be because we learned from humans. That is the truth my commander does not want to admit. Sarah looked at the young Kethril officer. Maybe there is hope for your species after all, Sheth. Back at the Resistance base, Sarah found the crew of the Defiant preparing for another operation. They were tired, hungry, and many bore wounds that had not properly healed. But their spirits remained unbroken. Captain, Marcus asked, did the meeting accomplish anything? Sarah thought about Vrath's offer. About Sheth's words, about the larger war being fought across the galaxy. Yes, she said finally. It proved that we are winning. The human reinforcement fleet arrived 4 months later, exactly when promised. But they did not arrive alone. Sarah stood in the Resistance command cave watching the tactical display as dozens of new signatures appeared in the system. The human fleet was there, 23 warships strong, but mixed among them were ships from 6 other species, worlds that had been conquered by the Kethril and had risen in rebellion. They came. General Park breathed in wonder. They actually came. The radio crackled to life. New Sarajevo Resistance, this is Admiral Okonkwo of the UHSF carrier Washington. I understand my daughter is down there somewhere being stubborn. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes for the first time in months. Her father. She had thought she would never hear his voice again. Admiral, this is Captain Okonkwo, she replied, keeping her voice steady. The Resistance is still operational. We are ready to coordinate with fleet operations. Good to hear, Captain. We are not here to rescue you. We are here to finish what you started. In orbit, Commander Vrath watched the new fleet arrive with a sinking feeling. The tactical situation had just shifted dramatically. His fleet still outnumbered the newcomers, but not by enough. And his ships were worn down from 6 months of constant operations while the human fleet was fresh and ready for battle. But what truly concerned him was the composition of the enemy fleet. 6 different species, all former Dominion subjects, all fighting together. This was unprecedented. The Dominion's power had always rested on keeping conquered species isolated and divided. Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet, Sheth reported. It is directed to all Kethril vessels. Play it, Vrath ordered. Admiral Okonkwo's voice filled the bridge. Kethril forces, this is Admiral James Okonkwo of the United Human Space Force. You have 2 options. You can withdraw from New Sarajevo peacefully, or you can fight. If you choose to fight, understand that you are not facing one species anymore. You are facing an alliance. The age of easy conquest is over. Vrath made a decision that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. Open a channel. When the connection was established, Vrath found himself looking at a human who resembled Captain Okonkwo. The family connection was obvious. Admiral Okonkwo, I am Commander Vrath. I wish to discuss terms. I am not interested in your terms, Admiral Okonkwo said coldly. I am only interested in the complete withdrawal of Kethril forces from this system. And what of the other occupied worlds? Vrath asked, already knowing the answer. That will be discussed once New Sarajevo is free. But understand this, Commander. The Dominion's easy victories are over. Every world you hold will cost you blood. Every system will become another new Sarajevo. You cannot sustain that kind of warfare indefinitely. Vrath knew this was true. The Dominion's economy was built on quick conquests and efficient exploitation. Long grinding wars of attrition would bankrupt them. If I agree to withdraw, will you allow my forces to leave peacefully? Vrath asked. You have my word as a military officer, Admiral Okonkwo said. No attacks during withdrawal. But you leave everything. All equipment, all installations, all stolen resources, and you will agree to a formal ceasefire while we negotiate the fate of other occupied worlds. Vrath looked at his tactical display one last time. He could fight. He might even win the space battle, but even if he destroyed the human fleet, more would come, and his ground forces were exhausted and demoralized. I accept your terms, Vrath said. The withdrawal took 2 weeks. Kethril forces packed up their equipment and marched to waiting transport ships under the watchful eyes of human and allied forces. There were no incidents. Both sides were too tired for further bloodshed. On the final day, Commander Vrath requested one last meeting with Captain Sarah Okonkwo. They met in the same abandoned warehouse where they had talked before. You won, Vrath said simply. I want to understand how. We had every advantage. Superior numbers, superior technology, superior position. By all logic, you should have been crushed in days. Sarah smiled. You did have every advantage except the most important one. You thought this was about logic and mathematics. But war is not a calculation. It is about will. It is about people deciding that some things are worth dying for. We have conquered 47 worlds, Vrath said, but we learned more from losing one than from winning all the others. Your tactics, your refusal to accept defeat, your ability to inspire others, these will be studied in Kethril military academies for generations. I hope they will, Sarah said, because if you ever come back, we will be ready. And next time we will not fight alone. Vrath nodded slowly. I do not think the Dominion will return. Our leadership is being forced to reconsider our entire approach to expansion. The cost of occupying hostile worlds is too high. Your resistance proved that. As Vrath turned to leave, Sarah called out to him. Commander, one more thing. Officer Sheth, I want you to promote her. She understood what you needed to learn long before you did. Vrath actually laughed. It is already done. She is now my second in command. When the last Kethril transport lifted from New Sarajevo's surface, the entire planet erupted in celebration. People poured into the streets. Resistance fighters embraced. Some laughed. Others wept. Sarah stood with her father and her crew from the Defiant. They watched the Kethril fleet jump to hyperspace and disappear. 7 months, Admiral Okonkwo said. You held them off for 7 months with one damaged ship and a bunch of volunteers. How did you do it? We remembered what it means to be human, Sarah said. We are stubborn, we adapt, and we never give up, even when logic says we should. 6 months later, Sarah stood on a platform in front of the rebuilt Defiant. The ship had been reconstructed exactly as it was, but it would never fly again. It was now a monument, a museum, a reminder of what one ship and 200 determined people could accomplish. The dedication ceremony was attended by representatives from 15 species. The alliance that had formed to liberate New Sarajevo had grown into something larger. A coalition dedicated to mutual defense against imperial expansion. Officer Sheth, now Commander Sheth, attended as the Kethril Dominion's official ambassador. The Dominion was suing for peace with the alliance. The age of easy conquest was truly over. As Sarah gave her speech, she looked at the faces in the crowd. Humans, yes, but also aliens from a dozen worlds. Species that had been enemies were now allies. Species that had been victims were now free. The Defiant was never about one ship, Sarah said to the assembled crowd. It was about an idea. The idea that freedom is worth fighting for, that the strong do not have the right to dominate the weak, that sometimes a single act of defiance can change the galaxy. She paused and looked at the ship behind her. We were told to surrender. We chose to be a thorn, and that thorn became a blade that cut through the chains of empire. The crowd erupted in applause. In the front row, her father stood with tears running down his face. Beside him, Marcus and the surviving crew of the Defiant saluted their old ship one last time. That evening, Sarah walked alone through the memorial. She traced her fingers along the hull, still scarred from battle. 19 names were inscribed on a wall inside, the crew members who had died so others could live. We did it. she whispered to the ghosts. We held the line, and we changed everything. Above her in the night sky she could see ships from a dozen species in orbit. Guards now, not conquerors. Protectors of a new order built on cooperation rather than domination. The Kethril Dominion still existed, but it was diminished. 36 of its occupied worlds had gained independence. The rest were negotiating terms. The galaxy was being redrawn, and the humans had held the pen. Years later, students from across the galaxy would come to study the Battle of New Sarajevo. They would learn about asymmetric warfare, about the power of morale, about the importance of adaptability. But most importantly, they would learn about humanity's greatest weapon, the one no technology could match. They would learn about stubbornness, about the refusal to accept defeat, about the burning determination that made humans look at impossible odds and say, "Watch us anyway." They would learn that humans were not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most advanced, but they were the most stubborn. And in the end, that made all the difference. The Defiant stood as a monument to that truth, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victory is simply refusing to lose. Commander Vrath had asked how they won. The answer was simple. They won because they were human. And humans do not surrender. They do not give up. They do not accept defeat. They fight. They adapt. They endure. And when the galaxy tells them something is impossible, they prove it wrong. That was the lesson of the Defiant. That was the legacy of New Sarajevo. And that was why the Kethril Dominion and every other would-be conqueror learned to fear one simple phrase. Humanity, fuck yeah.